Great, thank you. Thumbs up, excellent, excellent. Welcome everybody, it's great to see so many faces here. I'm Simon Walmsley, I'm the Senior Director, Ocean and Climate at the UN Foundation, and I really want to welcome you to this panel today, Navigating the Future, Bridging Shipping, Biodiversity and Decarbonisation. So before I introduce you to our very esteemed panel, sat around the front here, very nicely and calmly, I'm sure, I'll just give you a bit of context. So the ocean community is united under the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action on Oceans and Coastal Zones, launching a set of ocean pathways to drive the transition towards a net zero world and to further anchor the ocean in climate and biodiversity negotiations, incredibly important. This set of 7 pathways, known as the ocean breakthroughs, I'm sure we're all familiar with, are tipping points to be reached by 2030 to achieve a healthy and productive ocean in 2050, and importantly, a vibrant, equitable and sustainable blue economy. Ocean-based transport, the issue that we're going to be discussing today, shipping, is one of these alongside renewable energy, aquatic food, coastal tourism and of course marine conservation. So I hear you all say, why is this so important? Well, I didn't hear you because I'm on these earphones, but oh well. So as a major regulator, the science is clear for oceans. The ocean is a major regulator, the largest living space on Earth. The ocean is instrumental regarding delivery of the goals of the Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework, of course, as will be explored on Thursday at the Oceans Thematic Day, through a launch of the Marine Biodiversity and Ocean Health 2030 Breakthrough and Roadmap for International Shipping, which this event is innately linked to. And I'll unashamedly plug the event now. This event will be launched in the Marrakesh Partnership Ocean Action Event agenda at 11 to 12:30 at the Nashimi Room. So please be there, or be square as they used to say in the 60s. Ooh. The breakthroughs seek to support such multilateral efforts. Acceleration and investment in each will help unlock the potential of oceans as a source of solutions to the pressing challenges posed by climate change and biodiversity loss, and also boost mitigation and adaptation efforts for the benefits, importantly, of people and nature. A sustainable and resilient maritime sector needs not only to consider decarbonisation, but also a multitude of other environmental, social and socio-economic needs. So as we leverage the requirements to urgently reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which we all know is very topical, we also need to address the impacts of shipping on the environment, such as noise, mammal strikes, translocation of alien species. All these things are incredibly important. And these connections are so rarely made, so we've got to explore these together. They've not been efficiently coordinated with this urgent need to decarbonise. So there's a real opportunity at the moment. As we redesign the fleet and its operations for decarbonisation, we could look at the co-benefits to address biodiversity with little or no additional costs. So the panel today will explore this opportunity so that a sustainable maritime sector not only decarbonises but moves towards a nature positive. So with this in mind, I'd like to emphasise the commitments needed this year at the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice in June, and encourage all to submit those commitments and also meet those commitments, of course. And also noting that the Maritime Day theme next year is also oceans. So with this in mind, I'd like to thank the Ocean Pavilion for hosting and welcome our panel, our esteemed panel, who are sat very nicely in front of me and behaving, which is always good. So first up, we have Anna Larsen. Anna is the Communications Director for the World Shipping Council. Prior to joining the World Shipping Council, Anna served as the Head of Corporate Communications VP for Wallenius Wilhelmsen and has held several senior communications and marketing and sustainability roles for the company. Her background also includes management positions with corporate communications with Akzo Nobel in Sweden and the Netherlands. Please join me on the podium. So, next up, Noel Young, sat here in front of me, welcome. Island Innovations Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy. Noel is a passionate advocate for marine ecosystems and sustainable development. As the Programme Associate at the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Programme, she plays a crucial role in stakeholder engagement and the creation of the Blue Prosperity Plan. With a background in natural sciences and a focus on aquaculture and fisheries, Noel brings a unique perspective to addressing complex ocean challenges. Noel is deeply connected to her island home of Bermuda and dedicated to addressing the unique challenges faced by small island nations. Thank you, Noel. Please join us. Next, I have Raki. Raki is a Senior International Affairs Specialist at NOAA. In this role, she covers international climate change policy and maritime pollution issues, including leading NOAA's engagement at the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, and at UNFCCC. Prior to joining NOAA, Raki served as Southeast Asian Program Manager for over 10 years at the US Environmental Protection Agency. Raki was detailed to the Secretary of Global Women's Issues in the US Department of State in 2012 and EPA's Office for Wastewater Management in 2019. Thank you, Raki. Could you please join us? And last but by no means least, Krista. Krista Lorenz-Opaz, R&D Director at Jotun. Krista has a background as a chemical engineer with a PhD in organic chemistry. Since 2010, he has held various positions with Jotun, including in their R&D organisation, including R&D Director, Powder Coatings. His current position is Global R&D Director, Fouling Protection, which is very relevant to the discussions we're having today. In this role, he oversees the work to develop new technologies, products and solutions for the shipping industry with a focus on preventing fouling. The team he leads spans a range of disciplines including chemistry, marine biology and robotics, hydrothermodynamics, difficult one to pronounce. Please join us on the podium, Krista. Thank you. So, welcome. Welcome, esteemed panel. So, let's kick off with some questions. So, Anna, World Shipping Council, yours is a member organisation. Considering that, how far along your journey are your members in integrating nature-positive ambition into climate action? Now, this question is in three. I hope you can remember it all. I can remind you.
All right.
Can you provide examples? What is your top priority now to make further progress at scale and speed? Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Simon. So, World Shipping Council represents liner shipping. That's your container carriers, your vehicle carriers. You'll probably know our members as Maersk, MSC. And being a big emitter of CO2, greenhouse gases, of course, climate is very much top of the agenda. And our members are all action when it comes to that. 77% of all new builds ordered that will be delivered already by 2029, new ships, are designed to run on the greenest fuels. They can basically run on net zero fuels. And that's over 600 vessels. And when we actually get to 2029, that means that 20% of the total liner fleet will be able to run on low carbon fuels. So we're moving ahead quickly there, and that of course has a biodiversity and health impact as well. Moving to these new fuels, cleaner fuels, means that we're reducing sulfur emissions, NOx emissions, which impacts or improves the health of both people, plants, and animals. And of course, you know, climate is the long-term project that we're working on. But for certain most vulnerable species, populations, we also do more, let's say, repair-focused work. So an important such project that we're involved in is what we call the WC whale charts. Navigating the seas all day, all night. We're acutely aware that we're sharing it with big mammals, vulnerable to ship strikes, to noise from our engines. And we've been working for decades with different organizations to help develop and manage and make sure that carriers follow regulations and recommendations from governments and environmental organizations when it comes to avoidance zones, go slow zones, etc., to avoid and reduce the risk of ship strikes. And a while ago, we realized that we actually sat on a pretty unique set of competence here. A lot of this work is very regional. It's and local. It's set up around specific habitats, specific whale populations. But we realized that a lot of, and also at the same time we saw that compliance was not always great, simply because of lack of awareness. International carriers, you don't always know what's going on in every corner, and it's almost an impossible task for a local authority or a local organization to reach all these international carriers. So what we did is that we started working together with environmental organizations, governments, local policymakers on putting together a global whale chart. So that we now actually have published the second edition of this publicly available to download by anyone from our website, whale chart, which maps out all the speed and avoidance restrictions around the world. And it's also not only focused on strikes, but also noise reduction regulations. And also there's some voluntary activity going on as well. We've been working quite a long time to try to move the shipping lanes south of Sri Lanka further south. And most of our members today are actually voluntarily now going 15 nautical miles further south than the ordinary shipping lanes to avoid whales. And then, yeah, I think that's the core part. There's other stuff also like avoiding or trying to stop wildlife trafficking by guidelines. And we're also now working on a certification scheme for that. Adjusting our sort of targeting centers that we're currently working with law enforcement and customs to stop drugs trafficking. That can also be adapted and used to stop wildlife trafficking. But I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Wonderful. I mean, a few outlines there. The synergies part is incredibly important, isn't it? Win-win-wins, sweet spots is what we're searching for. I've actually got one more question for you, so hand it back, because I think it's really important to outline. In terms of these resources that you've described and other kind of support materials that non-state actors have, what else can you provide? You've talked about the whale charts, and I suppose it's a data question, where the data's coming from. How can you update the data? How can you kind of take that further in terms of scaling up? Because I think it's a good baseline, but how can you take that to scale further up? Thank you.
Indeed. Yeah, I think it goes really to collaboration and long-term collaboration. As an industry, we're in a very competitive environment. A lot of the time we're calling for regulation in order to be able to move with a level playing field. And that's the case for climate, for example, and greenhouse gases. But what we see, we've been starting a number of different initiatives, and we often can move really fast. Involuntary initiatives. Also partly it's because we actually represent so much of the industry. We've got 90% of capacity, so we can move the industry. But there's also the fact that we see that organizations, governmental bodies, being willing to work over time, building trusted relationships, sharing data, learning from each other, as you say. That's where it all comes in. So for the whale perspective, it's really about getting more organizations on board, understanding more about the research on whale behaviors, for example. It's very much a movable thing. You can set up regulations and around one population in a certain time, and then they go somewhere else. So you need to keep it updated. So that's where the data and the sharing becomes really important.
Thank you, Anna. So if we move to Noel, I was just going to comment on that last comment, because I remember they moved some shipping lanes in the Bay of Fundy for the northern right whales, and then the northern right whales moved back into the shipping lanes because of foraging behaviour due to climate change. So yeah, all has to be real time and updated. Noel, welcome. Couple of questions for you. So as a representative from small island developing states that's dependent on ocean health, whilst facing this existential impact of climate change, what is needed to ensure shipping is a positive contributor to climate, ocean and livelihoods? Easy question.
Yes. Well, I'm coming to you from the subnational island jurisdiction of Bermuda. I am very happy to hear that the shipping companies are actually addressing the economic and social impacts that may be caused due to climate change and climate justice issues. I would say that Anna already touched on it, that of course decarbonization when it comes to their uses of energies and fuels is very important. I would also want to touch on the fact that you mentioned data. I know that many of the shipping companies do already collect oceanic and atmospheric data on a regular basis. However, it would be great if they were to share that data with the local governments. Many small islands lack the climate financing. So, for example, Bermuda is not eligible for most climate financing because we are a subnational island jurisdiction of the UK. So we lack the resources to be able to actually have our own data collection programs, really to the extent that we should be having them at this day and age in 2024, of course. The inclusion of local communities would also be wonderful. Of course, we do have local persons that work at our ports, at the shipping ports, but having educational programs so that the communities and also the youth have a better understanding of your processes and what you're actually doing for the communities would be very vital. As well as potentially hosting things like internships, because of course many small island developing nations do not have higher education facilities within our communities. So for example, in Bermuda, you must make the choice, especially if you are interested in something like STEM. If you're interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, you must make that choice to either stay in Bermuda and kind of let fate find its way, or to leave and go to another country for higher education, which then also contributes to the emigration that we have. So currently, our government did a study that says that about 72% of the people that live on my island are planning to emigrate due to climate justice issues, lack of education, and the very high cost of living. Bermuda is currently, and has been for about 5 years, the most expensive country in the world to live in. So it's a bit, I'm trying to be polite, but it's unimaginable that we do not have higher education, at least within our country.
Thank you. And again, what I take from that is it's a question of scales. And Anna talked a lot about the industry and about kind of top down, and you're talking about communities, so it's linking those things together. Thank you. Second question, and this very much linked to your answer in your first question, unfortunately. But no, you're not getting away with it that easy, sorry. Do you see a future where local and indigenous communities join businesses as equal partners in designing and implementing resilient solutions?
Yes, I do. And I believe from what Anna said, that's already happening. Community-led initiatives are very important. For example, with the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program, that is a community-led initiative, which includes collaboration from people of all ages. It's very intergenerational. So, of course, we will do things like host workshops for children and youth, but then also host things like lunch and learns and specific educational opportunities for people of the older generations. I believe that that's something that could, of course, be incorporated in what the shipping companies are already doing to reach out to the local community to, of course, inform them. Those collaborative efforts are vital. They're very important. And I'd say that furthermore, well, I believe that I already touched on those points and that Anna has already, but inclusion is important. There's always a lot of discussion around financing, of course. There's the financing and always talks about infrastructure, but the humanities are missing. That's one point I really do want to touch on, is that often we don't hear talks about the lack of food when a ship has not come. You know, when we've had weather events in Bermuda, we get ships every week. If it's not there on Monday, you will find that there is moldy food in the grocery stores and that mothers are having difficulty feeding their children fresh fruit and vegetables because what is on the shelf at this point in time is moldy because we have not had new shipments. So the relationship between small islands and the very important shipping organizations it's indescribable, if I'm being honest, and it's such a difficult relationship to balance. But I believe that from what you've said, you're already doing a fantastic job of moving forward.
Thank you, Noel. And again, the food security issue strikes me in the face. It's been discussed at IMO, but when you bring it to reality like that, it really helps, and that's where awareness and these types of events are really useful. And the other thing that strikes me is the age of a ship and how long it's in operation. Compared to youth, we should be training our youth to change those ships as we're changing the ships. So some good lessons learned there. Raki, a couple of questions for you now, and widening the remit now to talk about High Seas Treaty, which is a favourite of mine. How do international regulations and frameworks like the Global Biodiversity Framework and the BBNJ, the High Seas Treaty, contribute to mitigating the negative impacts of shipping on biodiversity and the environment? Thank you, Raki.
Thank you. And first, I just wanted to say thanks for inviting me to be part of this discussion, and thanks to the Ocean Pavilion for hosting this event. NOAA is really excited to be an Ocean Pavilion partner again this year, and just really happy to be part of conversations like this. So thanks for the opportunity, and excited to be with part of this panel. Yeah, I think that international frameworks sort of serve two purposes in my mind. One is to sort of lift up domestic ambition, and also, of course, to facilitate international collaboration. The Global Biodiversity Framework that you referenced, Simon, I think that's a really good example of where sort of that domestic and international meet. So in the U.S., President Biden, on his first day in office, signed an executive order on combating the climate crisis in the U.S. and abroad. And part of that was to commit to 30% conservation of our lands and waters. That really nicely relates to the Global Biodiversity Framework target. I think it's target number 3. That also commits to conservation of 30% of land, water, and seas. So again, there's sort of a really, really tight connection there. When you look at BBNJ, there is ongoing areas of work there that are related to environmental impact assessments and also to high seas marine protected areas. So when BBNJ enters into force, there will be some really nice and new opportunities to look at cross-sectoral biodiversity opportunities, to look at cumulative impacts, and to protect areas that previously weren't able to be protected. So I think that's also a really exciting space to think about as we look into the future. And the third piece I'd bring in, Simon, that you hadn't mentioned, but I think we've sort of touched on here, is the work of the International Maritime Organization, or the IMO. So for folks that aren't familiar with IMO, it is a specialized UN agency that's focused on safe, efficient, and environmentally clean shipping practices. And they have several work streams that I think are really relevant for the biodiversity conversation today. So one which many people are aware of is the 2023 Global Greenhouse Gas Strategy, where they made some commitments to reduce carbon intensity of ships, to start thinking about fuel usage as well as clean energy. So that is underway, the implementation of that strategy and that regulatory framework. There's also another work stream that's related to underwater noise reduction from shipping. So for folks that aren't aware of this, commercial shipping is the number 1 cause of anthropogenic underwater noise, and that has really significant impacts on marine life, I would say broadly, on morbidity and mortality. So I think that's another work stream that's been really underway. We were really pleased to contribute to the updating of IMO's guidelines on underwater noise, and we're looking forward to the implementation of those and the opportunity that it creates, again, for the private sector, for others to come together and start to exchange technologies and best lessons learned. So I think that's another work stream. So when you look at the IMO's greenhouse gas work and this underwater noise work, as well as their ongoing work for many years on ballast water, on biofouling and other things, I think that there's a real opportunity here to start to really have some impact on biodiversity. But I only think that's possible if you really look at them in an integrated fashion. So looking at these as individual work streams is not going to be as powerful as if we can reach across some of these goals to do more work together.
Thank you. And again, what I take from that is, well, again, that struck me in the face, the domestic ambition, the coordination, all at different levels. It's all about bringing this together. And, you know, this is what we're talking about here. How do we link what's happening at IMO into BBNJ, into the GBF? It's a good question. I mean, again, I'm taking chair's privilege here. I did a presentation last week on exactly the same thing, the triple challenge, and I suggested the use of voyage plans. And each individual ship does a voyage plan, so why not use that for many different things to hit many different issues? But anyway, we can talk more about that in the discussion, I'm sure. Second question, Raki, and thank you very much for that. So as someone who's representing an organisation that has championed ocean climate solutions, how do you view the role of international collaboration in decarbonising the shipping industry, and what policies or technologies show the most promise in achieving these goals?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you actually started to answer that question in your comments. Nope, you did not steal my thunder. I think international collaboration is vital to decarbonizing the shipping sector, and I think we need to look beyond sort of the traditional country-to-country collaboration or one organization to another and start to think about non-strip players. The private sector has been huge in this space, and I think also thinking about the UN organizations like IMO, like UNFCCC. So I think that kind of collaboration and some non-traditional partnerships are going to be really vital to this work. One really great example that I'd love to highlight is the Green Shipping Challenge, which was launched by the US and Norway at COP27, so just about 2 years ago. This was an opportunity to look at really concrete actions that can decarbonize this sector in this decade and also start to do things to bring the sector into alignment with keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So I think there's some really useful and exciting things that have happened since that has started. Actually, last year, for folks that, or not last year, last week at the U.S. Center, there was an event to sort of demonstrate progress since that Green Shipping Challenge was launched 2 years ago. And what we call the first movers, we're sort of talking about over 80 commitments that have been made in this space. So everything from ordering cleaner fleets, ordering cleaner ships, to transitioning to different fuels, to actually even doing greening of ports. And that's what I think is really great about the Green Shipping Challenge is it looks across the whole sector. It doesn't look just at ship design. It doesn't look just at fuels, but it's looking at that entire value chain to sort of see where are the opportunities to decarbonize. And I think that's really, the right way to go is sort of to try to think about these types of integrated approaches. And since you're talking about technologies, I did want to mention that the U.S. has been really forward-leaning in investing in green technologies when it comes to this sector. I want to make sure I've got my facts right, but I think it's over $25 billion has been invested to electrify our ports and waterways, create new hydrogen hubs, decarbonize port operations, and build out zero-emission port technologies. So we are making significant investments with the hope that doing this work domestically again will lower cost of this technology worldwide. So hoping that we start to invest in some of these technologies and they become more available to some of our partner countries. And later this week, I just wanted to put a plug. We're hoping to launch our U.S. maritime decarbonization plan. So we really are again taking domestic action and hoping to work with our international partners to implement this internationally. There is a lot of work ahead in the energy transition. These are two things that I think are really important steps forward, but they're not the whole picture. And I think we're going to need to do more, and we're going to need to do more integrated design, which I can talk about more later. But I think there's just real opportunity to start thinking about, as you're designing vessels or as you're designing ports, it's the very thing that you said, Simon. Let's not meet one goal. Let's try to meet multiple goals at the same time. So if we know we have goals around decarbonization, let's also reduce underwater noise. Let's also meet some of our other biodiversity targets. Let's start to think about green corridors, those types of things. So I think there's real opportunities there.
Thank you, Raki. And again, I take from that interdisciplinary connection. Again, I think it's a message coming out, and I think this leads us nicely onto Krista and some questions for Krista. I've also got more questions for you, and I really want to kind of drill down into these synergies, so be prepared. I'm going to drill down a little bit more after this round, but thank you. So, Krista, in terms of how you work at Jotun, how are efforts to tackle biodiversity loss in the shipping industry interconnected with the fight against climate change?
That's a very good question, and from our perspective, biodiversity and climate, they're directly interlinked through what we call biofouling. And for those of you who don't know that, basically our oceans are teeming with life. If you immerse an object into water, it will immediately start to be colonized by a multitude of different organisms, and this is what we call biofouling. On a ship, the underwater hull will be fouled over time, and that represents a significant risk in terms of biosecurity, but also on increased emissions. And this is something that we need to address and understand better how to work on as an industry. If we start with looking at the biodiversity side of things, the most important role or the risk of biofouling is the introduction of invasive aquatic species. And a recent report has said that up to 70% of the recent bioinvasions are introduced on the ship hull, on a fouled ship hull. To give you a little example of what that actually means, I will give you an example that is close to my heart. I grew up on a small island on the coast of Norway. When I grew up on the summers, short as they are, we used to go down to the beach every day, playing in the shallows, running into the water, completely carefree about anything that was happening and what we could do and could not do. Recently, a new invasive species called the Pacific oyster has been introduced to Norway as on a fouled hull, and this has been spreading rapidly along the coast. Children today can no longer run directly into the sea. They need to wear protective shoes because of the razor-sharp mussels that are in the waters everywhere. And this is a direct and tangible consequence that both puts the local biodiversity at risk, but also changes the fundamental facts of everyday life, of human lives and the way that we experience things. And this is something that we need to be mindful that biofouling has a human aspect, but it also does have a significant aspect of a risk on the local marine life. Secondly, biofouling is also directly linked on a ship to its emissions. You talked about IMO, and IMO recently launched a report, I think it was in 2022, stating that even small amounts of fouling of organisms growing on the ship hull can increase the emissions from a ship by up to 19%. And bearing in mind that shipping accounts for close to 3% of the total global emissions, the numbers that we talk about here are absolutely staggering. And then considering the fact that by keeping those ship hulls clean, you could largely avoid and mitigate those additional emissions and also that biosecurity risk. This is something that we really need to focus on raising the awareness about. And I think also we need to acknowledge the fact that shipping is the biggest and most important mode of transport in the world. It's kind of stitching the whole community and the whole world together. We wouldn't work as a global community and even as a local community without having ships, and we had some good examples on that here. So we can't change shipping, but we can change the impact of what shipping does, both in terms of climate change, but also in terms of the biodiversity. And this is where also we asked a range of stakeholders across the industry to understand what kind of awareness they had on the consequences of biofouling. And what we found was that close to 2/3 of key industry stakeholders had little or no knowledge about what is the actual impact and consequence of this. So in addition to us developing technologies and solutions and working together with key players in the industry to introduce those into use, we also need to work to continue to raise the awareness and make sure that industry, stakeholders and individuals know and understand what is the consequence and how that works and fits together.
Thank you. And again, I take from that not many people know a lot about biofouling. It's again close to my heart and something that I used to work on. But the figures there, astounding.
It is.
And considering that up until the hierarchy of transition and movement to green fuels, first we have to sort the emissions out from efficiency, and that alone, the figure you described is an amazing figure, because
staggering.
We can look at 30 to 40% efficiency before we even go to the new fuels, but that is a significant part of that efficiency. So that's an amazing figure. So thank you for that, Krista. Second question, and it really looks at the interdisciplinary side of your organisation. How can interdisciplinary approaches such as combining chemistry, marine biology and robotics enhance the effectiveness of solutions aimed at minimising biofouling and reducing carbon emissions in maritime industries?
And I think once again back to the challenge that we have at hand, it's innately multidisciplinary. We cannot solve this with one technology or one single solution. We need to work across a variety of different technologies and different sets of options to move forward. We are having a very complex situation when it comes to shipping and marine industries in general, when we look at a global, regional and a local perspective of operations, but also a mix of commercial and private operators. So in order to actually handle and approach this complex, let's call it set of different challenges and stakeholders, we need also a multi-pronged approach to be able to address it in a proper way. So what we see, and we have now been working with the industry for close to 100 years, we have worked with a range of different stakeholders and developed technology in close collaboration with them to resolve and improve many of these challenges. You told me earlier that you had some experience from that earlier as well, and that of course needs to continue. And in addition to actually developing those technologies, we also need to make sure that we can find the right balance between only having technology on one side, but then also having the integration with the needs and the end users. Because again, there is not one single technology, and our approach as an industry needs to be technology neutral. We need to pull out all the stops that we can to really solve the challenges. It can be robotics, it could be digitally implemented solution, it could be traditional paints, it can be operational patterns as what's described there, but the important thing is to make sure that we work as widely as we can in the industry. And then back to technology and science are important to advance the tools and the methodologies that we have. And subsequently also, of course, working together with stakeholders to implement and introduce those solutions to the market makes sense. But that can only take us so far. Next step is again raising awareness, raising the understanding of the stakeholders of what is at play. And I would like to give another example again of one of those things where we need to balance technology and regulation with the understanding, because again, as a Norwegian, I have a lot of experience and I feel it also on how these changes affect our local community. And quite recently in 2019, an invasive species called sea vomit, it's not a nice name, but it's very describing for what it is. It was found in a Norwegian commercial port. Since that time, it has spread at record speed like wildfire across the different ports and across the coast in Norway, and it's a poisonous organism, and it's basically leaving a barren wasteland behind where most of the local ecosystem is more or less killed off. So it's quite a dramatic situation, and it doesn't really have any natural enemy. So once it's there, you have to find a way to live with it, but it's not something that we like to have. And then here, we're also ending up in a situation where regulations can't fix it because it's already in our local waters. So here we actually need to work with the local players, because what is found is that the most significant vector to continue the propagation of this species is local, commercial, and also private operations. So making sure that they are aware of the role that they play in this, and making sure that they can take their part of that in avoiding and mitigating the further spread, in making sure that their vessels are kept clean and they avoid contributing to that. That is an additional and important factor as we see it as well.
Thank you. And again, I liked your original statement, technology neutral and pulling out all the stops. I'll definitely keep that quote. Thank you. I do actually, sorry, I'm going to ask you another question, because I think this integration, I think we need to get down to this integration. And we've talked about industry integration, we've talked about state integration. Let's talk a little about academic integration, because again, I'm an ex-academic too, so I'm quite interested in your relationship with NTNU and the fact you're a faculty member of natural sciences, and how do you think that's helping in terms of this academia industry crossover, in terms of driving out innovation?
Again, there are several perspectives here, but the bottom line is that collaboration is always a good idea. And here again, I think the value and the strength is bringing different perspectives. Innovation and technology development in the industry is very focused on what you're going to develop and also the end user perspective. Whereas in the academia, it's more wide set of ways to approach things. It's more fundamentally looking at the bigger picture and trying to get the bigger answers. And then putting those two together, you can really create some creative power and innovative strengths that allow you to progress much faster. And also, industry has a significant role as a part of society to actually bring context and relevance to academia.
Yes.
Because academia in itself is a theoretical approach, but when it's integrated into the way that the industry works and bringing real-life problems into the academic world, we can also making sure that we can refocus and reutilize those key resources to address big problems in a good way. And I would say also one big effect that is a burning topic, which I believe very strongly in, is also that it connects the students and those who are taking an education into real-world problems, because we need to motivate those who are going to be the future scientists, future colleagues, the future people who will actually live in this world and needs those solutions. We need to motivate those to also be part of that change.
Thank you again. Great answer. I really like the context setting and making academia real world. And I know we have plenty of academics here. I look at Alex, who I'm sure his work is real world, but the context is context setting and the awareness is ever increasing. So I'd really support that. And I'd also add to that, again, as chair's privilege, data provision, data availability. From past experience, things like peer review, it takes a long time before your data is available, and your data should be available now or near now. So yeah, taking all those points. So time for the lightning round. Oh, please go ahead, Noah.
You mentioned the words stakeholder engagement, and I just wanted to ensure that the organizations here and that all of the global shipping companies understand that they should be a part of the stakeholder engagement processes of all nations when it comes to marine spatial planning. I know marine spatial planning and marine protected areas are quite a big deal right now, especially for small island developing nations who are currently in the process of creating their plans. But I did notice within my involvement with the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program that we didn't have a ton of comments from the shipping organizations. So I don't know if that is because they feel as though they should not be involved in the process because they're not technically national companies, they're global companies. But it's very important to have your feedback as well as the data that you can bring to the table so that we're better able to accommodate your needs within those industries.
I think again, let me take... Oh, sorry, Anna, go on. Please answer.
I think that is a really interesting comment. I have not personally been involved in this, but I think from our perspective, I think intuitively we kind of see our interests as secondary. Fully on board with the 30% goal, and I think we have to work around it, and it's maybe us who need to adjust. But definitely take your comment there, and we'll look into that.
And again, I think that's a great combination question, isn't it? Marine spatial planning and where the shipping industry fits in, because ships do different things at different scales, different levels. My immediate thought with small island development states is things like anchor chain damage, and then maybe linking that back to voyage plans and how you could actually put a measure in for anchor chain and where you anchor in your voyage plan if you go into a small island development state. Anyway, chair's privilege again. My apologies. Now for the lightning round. So, Anna, we'll start with you if that's okay, so we can rewind. So, this needs some slight explanation because I don't want just 3-word answers. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. So, looking ahead in 3 words, what is your vision for the future of sustainable shipping? So, please explain your 3 words. Thank you.
I'm going for 3 R's: renewable, restorative, and resilient. And I think that really sort of reflects the breadth of our discussion here today. Renewable on the fuel side, climate to minimize our climate impact. Restorative, so that we're actually working on restoring habitats and populations where we can. And resilient, because we need to do all this and still stay in business and be able to function. We need to serve the world, and keeping the world together, keep supply chains going. And climate challenges are they affect us as well. Right now, and as do sort of political situations, etc. There's an interesting combination in what's currently happening in the Red Sea, where all container vessels almost are having now to go around the Cape, where they're exposed to increasingly unpredictable and very violent weather, which is creating its own challenges from an environmental and safety perspective.
Excellent, thank you. Same question to you, Noel.
I apologize, can you repeat the question?
I certainly can. Looking ahead in 3 words, what is your vision for the future of sustainable shipping? Easy question, again.
I would start with hope. I am very hopeful with all the information that I received from today's conversation. It has given me even more hope for the future that all industries and all of these different social partnerships can come together. My second would be equity. again, not equality, but equity, for the shipping organizations themselves as well, seeing as you've said that sometimes you consider yourselves to be secondary. I think it may also be important to put yourself in the forefront in the local context, so that you can be better incorporated and included, and that we are better able to collaborate together. And the third would be, again, data and research. I know that that isn't exactly one word, but small island developing nations really do need the support when it comes to data collection, and it will make it a lot easier for us to create policy, as well as to advise on international policies.
Thank you very much, Noel. And same question to you, Aki.
I was hoping I didn't get the same question. You all had such good answers. I can think of two to maybe start, and I'll add maybe a third one. Integrated design. So just following on my earlier comments, I think when we're starting to think about solutions, one thing that's going to be really important is to really incentivize and encourage integrated design of vessels. And part of that, I think, is going to be thinking about what the vessel's operational needs are, when you're specifying that and designing it, but also what does the future look like? And as technical solutions come to market and are de-risked, are vessels ready to be able to take on those approaches? And I think somebody in the panel mentioned that, vessels are built and last a long time. And so how can you be ready for the things that are coming into the future? And like I talked about earlier, I think the meeting of multiple goals. So if you are already meeting decarbonization goals, where are the opportunities to think about biofouling and make sure your hulls are clean, to think about energy efficiency, to think about reduction of underwater noise. I think for NOAA, that nexus between technologies that can both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve energy efficiency are really vital, because that's the space where you can also do other things that protect biodiversity, like reduce noise. And so I just really appreciate being part of this panel, because I think we just each bring a different perspective to that, but I think the integrated design piece is going to be really important for sustainability.
And just quizzing you a little bit more on that.
Yeah.
Integrated operation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talked about voyages quite a bit, and sort of thinking about, it's not just about how you design your vessel, but then how do you operate it in the waters? Where do you slow down to avoid whale strikes? Where can you speed up? And I think the nice thing about some of these solutions that come out there, then you also reduce maintenance costs when it comes to biofouling. You also save costs of fuels. You save different types of things. And so I think there's just a lot of benefit that you can do if you find the right solutions, again, for that particular vessel. And it is tailored to vessels. So I don't want to make it sound like it's a one-size-fits-all approach, but starting to get to that nuance when you are doing voyage planning and in that context.
Thank you very much. Krista, same question for you.
Wow, what a surprise. So I would say clean hulls, collaboration, and awareness. Those are, from us, the most important, and then kind of summarize the things that we talked about earlier as well. To start with clean hulls, as I mentioned, a clean hull will minimize the emissions caused from the shipping industry, at the same time also minimizing the risk of biofouling. There are several and good existing solutions today to make sure and manage those things in a good way to minimize the risk of biofouling and assuring a clean hull. And that can be implemented easily across different operations to assure that we protect the oceans and avoid climate impact. Secondly, as I talked about also, awareness is a very important factor, and making sure that we actually spread the word on what is going on and how things work is a very important parameter. Working across different industry stakeholders, from industry to individual, needs to be aware and understand what role they play into this. We need to make sure that both the industry itself, but also coastal communities and the individuals understand how these things fit together and what things do, because only then can we again protect our oceans and save the climate. And lastly, also collaboration. One cannot do everything, but everyone can do something. And I think we need to remember that we all have a role to play, and if we play it together, we can do it better. And there is so much to do, and now, even much more important than ever before, it's time to act, because again, the only competitor we have in this game is the future we don't want. So it's really important to make sure what is at stake here.
Thank you. Great answer again. Thank you very much. So I didn't actually tell the panel what I'm going to do next, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to open it up for questions to each other. I mean, Noel kind of started doing this. I always think it's really good to do this because you very rarely get a chance to talk to such an integrated bunch in one area. So please, if you do have any questions before I open it up to the audience. Excellent. Go ahead, Noel.
What do you think this industry can best do to support the cultural heritage preservation of the small nations that they serve?
Having worked with the shipping industry for quite a while and seen it from, let's call it an industrial perspective, but also from the more local operating perspective, I think the most important thing that we need to remember is that there is not one single answer to solve all the problems, and you find the best solution through dialogue and through working together with the individual communities and the individual regions to identify what solutions works the best. And again, as you talked about, how can we work to kind of preserve the cultural heritage? That is also to reduce the impact of what the industry does. Because I mentioned some of the effects of invasive species. Those change the ecosystems. Those can change where you can do your fishing, what kind of fishes that you can actually catch, and other things. And again, an example from Norway where we have seen over the last years that 60% of the crabs that are caught are non-native species. So that changes again the foundation of what you actually catch and can have an effect directly or indirectly on how things work. So again, raising the awareness of what the individual have to do, but also helping people to take action to improve collectively is important.
Excellent question, excellent answer. Does anybody else want to have a crack at that one? It's up to you. No?
Yeah, I think actually I was really intrigued by your proposals, Noel, and I was interested to hear more. I mean, the shipping industry looks very long term. As we've heard, a ship is built to last for at least 25 years, etc. But we also, many of the if you look at our members, they're old companies, and they have been serving communities for a long time. You have a local offices, local staff. But interested to hear from you, what can we do more to actually help? You've mentioned a few things, but be interested to hear more and to also continue this conversation later.
I'd say the first step would be to support nations in the ratification of the High Seas Treaty. Again, I previously mentioned that Bermuda is the only nation within the Sargasso Sea, but unfortunately we are not able to have a say in how protection policy is created. The second would be financing of local efforts to protect our nations, essentially. Of course, for us being small island developing nations, we do depend on our ocean. In many cases, people see that as an economic dependence, and they forget that it is both a social dependence as well as a cultural dependence. And I guess I'd say the third one would be, again, when it comes to research and development, just assisting in those cases, but more so opening your doors so that the public can understand the real importance. Many people in my community, I don't want to speak for all island nations, but many people in my community really do understand and value the importance of shipping. In Bermuda, we import over 90% of what we eat. We do not have many farms. We only have small-scale farmers at this point in time. So in that case, again, we value the services that you provide, but there isn't a broad understanding in my country that if a ship doesn't come, for example, if we have a severe hurricane and a ship is not able to dock at our port, Bermudians have maybe 5 to 8 days before we run out of food. So more education within the community really is important so that people can understand.
Thank you. Again, great answer. And I'm letting the panel run, but I shouldn't have done perhaps, but it's been such a rich and great conversation. Thank you. But please, if there's any questions from the floor, please go ahead. Any questions from the floor? So you've answered all the questions. That's a great sign. Oh, one there, one over there. Thank you. Please say where you're from and your question, please.
Yeah, hello. I'm from Russia, Moscow, Marine Research Center. Speakers mentioned some elements of sustainable shipping. Could you summarize, primarily Anna and Rakhi, what should the maritime shipping industry should focus now? What is viable? And what stakeholders must be involved in this process?
So I think if I understand the question, it's sort of what's the near-term focus of what we should really be thinking about now. And I'd actually love to get your perspective on this too, as the real expert, because I'm not a shipping design expert. But I think it depends on the vessel. So some vessels it is going to be retrofitting, and some of these vessels already have certain technologies in place, so it will be retrofitting. It is operations, so starting to think about, as you're operating your vessel, are there things that you can do now, whether it's decreasing cavitation, whether it's slowing speeds at certain areas that could help meet some of your environmental goals. And then it is looking to the future and starting to invest in a cleaner fleet that'll meet multiple goals. So I think it's hard to answer that across the board because each vessel and each situation is different, but I think it is partly a combination of operational as well as design. And I'd love to get more perspective on this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think our perspective is very much, my perspective comes less from a sort of individual carrier's perspective. I think you're completely right. And as an individual carrier, that's what you need to do. And what we see is our carriers, our member carriers, they are investing, new and also retrofitting. Actually, it was just today in the news, the first retrofit of a large-scale container ship to a methanol engine. So that's one part, investing in technology. But the technology is there, the fuels are there. The fuels are not there. That's the problem. The technologies are there, and the vessels are there, but the fuels are not there. And the linchpin here is regulation. So our eyes really now is on IMO and the 2025 meeting and making sure, really working hard to make sure that there is regulation put in place, both with regard to technical measures, financial measures, which manage to make green fuels competitive in price to fossil fuels. Because unless we do that, we're never going to get the investments at scale that we need. If you could just increase the price, double the price of fossil fuels, but your green fuels are 4 or 5 times more expensive, it's not going to make any difference. Nobody's going to invest. So there's good things happening now. There's ambitious shippers and shippers organizations, ambitious carriers who take steps to demonstrate that things can be done. But for a level playing field, to actually make the shift for the industry as a whole, we need regulation that really manages to level the price between fossil fuels and green fuels. That's the big step.
Thank you. I'm being signalled from the back there. I was going to try and summarise, but my goodness, how do I summarise that? It was a rich and brilliant conversation. So I just want to say thank you to the Ocean Pavilion, and I just want to put my hands together for the panel. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. Thank you.